Question number 9, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
This question is to the Prime Minister and asks, does he stand by all his statements?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, yes.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
If he stands by his statement that his government, and I quote him, has been leading the charge on really expanding the use of the gold card and the opportunities and advantages, end of quotes, why has his government capped the gold card travel cost?
The Right Honourable
Mr.
Prime
Speaker,
Minister.
yes, I stand by that statement, and I'm delighted that that senior member got the opportunity to use his gold card on the Petone to Wellington route this morning.
Point of order, Speaker.
Point of order. Order. Point of order, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Mr. Speaker, two matters. One is that is not an answer to my question about the capping of the travel cost. And second, I did not use any gold card this morning.
Order. Order. The second... Order. Order, Mr Brownlee. The problem with the member's question is there were two questions in his supplementary question. The Prime Minister chose to answer one of them. Further point of order. Order. Sorry to interrupt the member. I have a point of order here from the Honourable David Parker.
I accept your ruling, sir, that the Prime Minister is only required to answer one of two questions, but that doesn't mean to say that he can answer a third that wasn't asked. That was out of order, and it should be, sir, you that stops the Prime Minister doing that.
I didn't hear anything that I thought was out of order from the Prime Minister.
Order, Speaker.
Point of order, the Right Honourable Mr. Peters.
A question that says if he stands by a statement why has something happened is not two questions, it's just one.
Order. I have ruled it was two questions.
Wrong.
Well, then the member will stand and withdraw that comment immediately or else leave the chamber.
Speaker, I withdraw and apologise. Point of order.
No. Order. 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 I've ruled on that matter. If the member wishes to raise a fresh point of order, I'm very happy to hear it. But if any way I consider we're just going over old ground and re-litigating where we've been, then I will have no hesitation of asking that member to leave the chamber.
Mr. Speaker, with point of order.
Point of order, the Right Honourable Winston
Mr. Speaker, I am not going to let down the education system of this country by have you make it up as you go along. I'd rather leave the House than do that.
Well, the member's welcome then to leave the House. The member will leave the chamber. Order. Order.
Supplementary.
Question.
Supplementary.
Order. Supplementary question. Ron Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Prime Minister, if his government is leading the charge to help seniors who have contributed to New Zealand all of their working lives, why cap funding on free travel to super gold card holders and force ratepayers to top up the shortfall? Why?
Mr. Speaker,
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, I think it's important to have a few of the facts, which is, firstly, when we came into office, super gold card funding was 18 million approximately. Now it's 28 million. There are about 800 businesses using it. Now there's over 8,000. The entitlements don't change, Mr. Speaker. Yes, we are going to be driving better value for money for the providers that do that, but I think that's sensible. There's a review in 18-19, and if the Right Honourable Winston Peters didn't use his super gold card this morning on the train, why the hell did he have a super gold card photo op?
The last part now will not help the order of the House.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question. Ron Mark.
Won't ask if that was a pathetic answer.
Order. Can I just have the supplementary question immediately?
Yes, coming. Mr. Speaker, it's coming. If the
Order. Order. Ron Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the government can't afford the free travel benefits of the gold card, how can it afford to give full super benefits to over 82,000 immigrants who have come here and acquired superannuation after 10 years? How can it afford to fund their free health care? And how can it afford to give tax cuts to his wealthy mates?
Order. A number of questions there. The last part is certainly not to be addressed and the answer is out of order.
Well, Mr Speaker, as the member knows, the entitlements for Super Gold Card aren't changing. The number of businesses using it are dramatically being enhanced, Mr Speaker, and I think the government can be proud of its record in relation to Super Gold Card.
Point of order.
Order.
Point of order.
Point of order, Ron Mark.
I'll seek leave of the House to table letters, correspondence from Greater Wellington Regional Council that shows that the government is capping the funding.
Order. It's a marginal call, but I'll put the leave and leave it for the House to decide. Leave is sought to table. How many letters can I just check? One letter, as described by Ron Mark. Leave is sought to table that document. Is there any objection? There is none. It can be tabled. Question number 10.